So I will now answer some questions because everybody keeps complaining I'm not asking questions. So here, I'm trying to answer questions which are dealing with the subject matter we've been dealing with. So here someone says, does one have to force his consciousness to visualize a golden pearl or a diamond when actually other images come to mind while meditating, such as crude black stones associated with an obstacle? Well, you can visualize what you like, or you don't have to visualize anything. The visualization offered is one which is usually recommended. But as long as we remember that we are bringing in the darkness into something which is destroying our ego, our self-cherishing mind, that's what the dark light is doing, because the self-cherishing mind does not want the sufferings of others. They think they have enough suffering already. Why take more? And so that voluntarily taking in the suffering of others hits directly at our self-cherishing mind. And then that transforms, because once the ego is out the way, then the true nature of the mind, which is luminous clarity, can shine forth. And then that goes with the out-breath to heal the person who one is visualizing, or the group of people that one is visualizing. That's the basic meditation, that you're bringing in the pain and the karma of the beings and giving out from the vast store of one's own original nature, which is never affected by however much suffering. That's the visualization. How you want to see that, as far as whether you want to see pearls and diamonds or you don't want to see pearls and diamonds, or somebody recommends seeing a vajra, etc., that is up to you. What is meaningful to you is what will work for you. So, of course, you can create your own visualization. Just remember the intention, which is that we bring in the darkness and we give out the light, hitting at our ego and then rediscovering our true nature. And as long as we keep that in mind, that's what the intention is, then how we visualize that is up to you. Oh. Okay, 2 questions. How can I get convinced by direct experience that our true nature is Buddha nature? Well, you have to, exactly that. You have to have direct experience. That is the whole point. In the meantime, one can trust that very realized masters through the ages, who definitely understood much more than we understand, have said we have Buddha nature, because they themselves have directly realized it. And not only realized it, but have exemplified it, right? They have all agreed that the nature of the mind is completely pure, is filled with wisdom and compassion, and is empty, but at the same time luminous clarity. They have all agreed on this. And I would suggest that they might know what they're talking about, because none of them have ever said, well, I've looked very hard and I've never seen it. So obviously it doesn't exist. All these guys from before, they don't know what they're talking about. They have all agreed that this is how it is, and it can be experienced. At first as a glimpse, and then gradually, the whole point is that first there is a glimpse, and then we lengthen those few moments, and they come more and more until finally that one is in a state of primordial awareness the whole time. But read the texts by people who know, And look, definitely it's true. I mean, I'm not saying definitely it's true. Go and find out for yourself. Go and find out for yourself. Because only by direct experience and realization can one really know, of course. But one can look with the confidence that, you know, this is something which is actually not difficult to realize. It's difficult to sustain it. It's difficult to sustain it. This is why even the greatest masters, you know, spent years and years in retreat. It's because, not because they couldn't find it, but because it's hard to keep it continuous. But definitely just getting glimpses and realizations, that is not so difficult, really, honestly. You know, even the most simple people can do that. I mean, really very ordinary people have had very direct experiences. It's not just high yogis, is what I mean. It's not just high lamas and yogis living in caves. Really very, very ordinary people have recognized the nature of the mind. And it's no big deal. The problem is, as I say, that then the real work starts of trying to work out how to balance it so that it you know, one recognizes that state whenever one needs to, at least. But yeah, you have to practice. And then the second one, oh, this is lovely. What is ego? She says, I'm not sure because it's a misused word. Well, of course it is. And whatever they are talking about in psychology, in Buddhism, basically, oh dear, it means this sense of self which we have, which gives us the idea of an enduring, unchanging, solid I, in contradistinction to everybody else who is non-I. Now, mostly, even in religious circles, that's regarded as a fundamental truth, right? We have a soul, which makes us different from everybody else's soul. So there's lots of little souls running around. But from a Buddhist perspective, that idea of something solid and enduring and unchanging I at the center of all everything which is going on around us, as I say, like a spider weaving its web, that from a Buddhist perspective is our fundamental ignorance. And in spiritual circles is called the little self. Even in most spiritual circles, they understand that there is a small self which is obscuring something greater. In theistic religions, they would say it is obscuring God. If we regard God not as somebody out there sitting in the sky pulling strings, but the innermost depths of our being, our true being, as God, then you would say that would be what Buddhists would call the nature of the mind. And the ego is this small self which obscures that. So it's this this sense of I as opposed to everybody outside of I, which, as I said, in Buddhism is located, in the Chittamatra school, is located in the seventh consciousness. Now, when that sense of I doing something, this is, from a Buddhist perspective, what creates karma. Right? The sense of an agent. I did this action. I said this action. This is what binds karma to us, so that we keep revolving around endlessly, trailing this endless karma. Because, why? Because we have this sense that there is an I who did all this, and therefore an I who will experience this. Aileen, do you have a mala? Okay. So, if we consider karma, each karma as a bead, then we do one karma and it pulls all the other beads with us endlessly in a cycle, right? So the idea that I did something brings along with it all the other things endlessly that we have done and said and thought. So what to do? We cannot possibly get rid of all these endless beads. They're in an endless cycle. But what's holding them together is the thread. And the thread is the thought that this was done by me, by the ego. Cut the thread, and then the beads won't move. That's the end of karma. You understand? So therefore in Buddhism always the point at the end of it all is just to cut. Then from a Mahayana point of view, because we have vowed to come back again and again to benefit all beings, one can do that, but one doesn't come from compulsion. One acts then out of compassion, which is something very different. Thank you. So this central sense of I is what we have to examine. The Buddha said, and in many meditations are centered on asking, who am I? And looking for this I, searching for it everywhere, until finally we recognize that you can't find it. But this is no good just saying that. It doesn't help. We have to experience it. And that experience in itself will also lead to an understanding that it's not that we don't exist or that we don't function. When one has cut the thread of the I, it doesn't mean that then we go into a kind of cosmic blankness. We wake up. The whole Buddhist path is actually about awakening. Bud means to wake. And so we wake up from this dream of our illusion. And then we're on a very different level of awareness, which is much clearer, much brighter, much more spontaneous than our ordinary gross level on which we are normally acting, driven by the sense of me and mine. That level of awareness isn't concerned with me and mine. It's a very open, spacious awareness. So this is why in Buddhism, right, in all schools of Buddhism, the object to be refuted is this sense of a solid, enduring me, which is separate from everybody else's solid, enduring them. It's not like that, really. We don't see things how they really are. And therefore we suffer. This is the point. We suffer, we cause suffering to everybody else. Because we don't see things properly. We see things very distorted. So meditation is really about waking up. It's not about making us feel better per se. It's not about making samsara more comfortable or making the ego feel happier. In the beginning, maybe that's what we need to do, but ultimately we have to transcend all of that. We're not polishing our egos. Nice, shiny, spiritual me. It's dissolving the ego. Because from the very beginning it's never really existed. It's just a very fast-paced dance, but it's not really there. If you look for it, you can't find it. Oh, yes, I don't know. How come one has to work so hard in order to reveal his true nature and get free from samsara instead of getting free from samsara in the first place? Well, we got stuck here. Who knows how? There are various theories on this. But basically, the Buddha said that if you are shot by a poisoned arrow, then rather than say, no, don't touch the arrow, I want to know what bird these feathers came from and what type of wood is the shaft and what was the caste of the person that made the arrow and shot it and so on and on and on. He said, you'll be dead by that time. Point is, pull out the arrow. And so this is it. I don't know how we got here, but here we are. And now the point is that we, since the very beginning, actually, we are free. But we just don't know that. Since the very beginning, we are Buddhas, but we don't recognize it. So in the end, we have to come back to the place that ultimately we have never left. But it's a journey because of our delusion. Once we arrive back there, we say, oh, this is home. I've always been here. How didn't I know it? But in the meantime, it looks like, hard work. There is a problem for so many people. As parents to young children, mine is 2 years old, how can we raise them to grow up and be less resentful towards themselves and others, being a part of a Western society as discussed before? Well, first of all, children learn by example. They don't really listen to what you say, but they watch what you do. So it's no good telling them to be nice, kind little children and then start arguing with your neighbors, right? Children learn by example. And so if you want to have happy children, you have to be happy. If you want kind children, you have to be kind. I think also as children grow up, you should include them in your spiritual activities. Don't think children are dumb. Children are very intelligent. And even at 2 years old, they understand a whole lot more than you think. Again, I was reading an article recently on how parents teach their children. And the fact that from more lower levels of society, the children, often parents don't really talk to their children. They're too busy and they just give them orders or whatever, and they don't really discuss things. So the children grow up with a much more limited intellectual capacity, whereas from more affluent families, the parents take time to talk to the children. And therefore, the children's brain grows experientially. Children's brains are exploding when they're young. And they also said, however young the child is, don't talk to them baby talk. Babies actually get very confused if you talk baby talk to them. They've discovered that actually a baby understands much better if you just talk to them normally with good grammar and an extensive vocabulary. The child understands. When you start talking gobbledygook to them, they get very confused. So take it that this child is a rational human being, albeit small and developing, that it understands a whole lot more than you think. From a Buddhist perspective, it is just coming back again. And so it really has it's not a blank sheet. It already has a lot going for it already. And so respect it as an intelligent being and include it, your children, in your spiritual, not by setting down lots of rules, but when the child is old enough, teach it to meditate. People have discovered that children 3 or 4 years old can meditate. Not for very long, but for a few minutes, and they're very, very grateful for it. It gives them a center. There are many nowadays YouTubes and videos and so forth on how to teach children. How to teach children mindfulness and meditation and things like this. And also there are many books, there are many cartoons on the life of, great beings written for children. There are a lot of storybooks which have a good message and so forth. So really try to encourage the children to have contact with good ideas, good thoughts, stories dealing with kindness and compassion and good qualities, but above all, you yourself exemplify what you are what you want the children to become. You be that. Because, as I say, children learn much from what we do than from what we say. So, because society is going so much in one direction, you really have to set boundaries, like not letting them just end as they get older, endlessly be watching, computer games and things like this. Set standards, and what they do watch, try as much as you can at least to make sure it's something which is fun and interesting, but at the same time edifying, encouraging good qualities in the heart, and discuss things with them. How they're feeling. Teach them metta meditation. Children are not stupid. And often they want to be included. One of the very good things about Thich Nhat Hanh, of the many good things about Thich Nhat Hanh, was that whenever he had retreats, he would always have simultaneously a retreat for children. And so all the participants were encouraged to bring along their children, whatever age, and they had trained people running a camp for the children at the same time. And at certain points, the children would come in and sit in front, and Thich Nhat Hanh would talk to them. And, they would, and he would say, you keep your eye on your parents. If they're not doing what we say, if they're being unmindful, you tell them, And
we had the last year and a half, we have weekends for children, for families.
Fantastic. It's so important.
Many parents participate.
Wonderful. I rejoice. Because it's so important. Also because I have met a number of young people who belong to Dharma families in the West who grew up feeling very resentful about the Dharma because they felt that their parents loved the Dharma more than they loved them, and that they regarded their children as an obstacle. I really wanted to go away on this retreat, but I've got to stay home and take care of you. And so the children grow up really, having a lot of resentment, jealousy towards the Dharma. And some of them never got over it, some of them did. Eventually they understood, but it was painful for the child to feel that they had this rival for their family's attention and love, which they couldn't compete with. And so it's very important not to do that, but to include the children and to make the children recognize that this is part of the family. This is something we're all doing together. And so it's wonderful that you're holding retreats for children. It's very, very important that they have a good example to follow and the feeling that they are walking on the path along with their parents. This is the only good thing about impermanence. You don't stay a teenager forever. We were all teenagers once. How were you as teenagers? it's just a phase. I mean, of course, some never recover, but most teenagers, no matter what they do grow up. And in the meantime, you know, you can just practice patience and smile and remember when you were a teenager, and, you know, it's okay. Yeah, of course. And nowadays, especially, very hard having young, you know, I'm watching their beautiful minds get distorted. But it, you know, most of them pass through it. I appreciate in Israel it's especially difficult because then, you know, your beloved children have to go into the army. And that is a challenge for them and for you. But they come out the other side. And, you know, you all have. And, you know, this is part of life's experience. You know, you can't cushion your children in cotton wool. They have to experience life. And eventually this is their life. And all you can do is to be there for them. And also to let them know that no matter what they do, you love them. This is very important, I think. You know, when children are going through these adolescent stages and getting very confused and going all in funny directions, just to know that no matter what they do, you love them. They're your children. Let them know that. Tell them, you know. Say to them. I remember when I was about 15 or 16, one time, out of the blue, since I was a very nice little girl, I wasn't doing anything. In those days, you didn't. This is pre-hippie. But one day, my mother just said to me, I just want you to know that there is nothing in the world you could ever do that would cause me to not love you. And I took that into my heart. It wasn't I was going to do anything, but I knew it was true. That no matter what I did, she would love me. And that's very important for children to know that. So tell them. Don't assume they know. Is there such a thing as justice? And or are we in a position to know what is just in order to fight for it, not fight in a violent way? Well, I mean, we know what is true and good and what is fair in our hearts. You know, we have been dealing with the fact that we want to live in this world harmlessly and not hurt others. And that as much as possible, justice, not in the sense of being revengeful, but in the sense of, you know, really trying to help and care for others. This there definitely is, you know, that we want things to be fair and fight for it in the sense of, as she says, not in a violent way, but yes, we can see what is right and fair and just. And we can move towards that as much as possible. And stand up. You know, loving kindness, compassion, justice, all these words, they are not a sign of weakness. They are a sign of strength. Aggression and fighting violently and anger, this is weakness. It's not strength. We think it makes us strong. It is not strength. Genuine strength is inner character, which will fight inwardly, stand up for, better than fight. Fight in this has a very aggressive tone to it. We will stand up for what is right. That takes tremendous courage, especially when, you know, the society is going in one direction, to stand up for what we know is true and right. It takes tremendous courage. And, you know, we all have that responsibility. Otherwise, you know, nothing ever changes for the better. when we think of the great people of this century, they were all people who stood up, like Mahatma Gandhi and Mandela and so forth, Martin Luther King, and many people actually, sung and unsung, who stood up for what was right. They saw what was right. And despite the opposition, despite the slanders, despite everything, they stood firm. And that takes courage, even if you get shot for it. It takes courage. So yes, we should stand up for justice, for what is right, for what is true. Definitely. That, neuroscientists, even neuroscientists, many, the more enlightened neuroscientists, say, we now know a lot about the brain, but we still have not found the mind. And I think this is very important to remember that. The brain is one thing, it's the instrument, but it is not the mind. Look for it. I'm not sure I understand this. I'll read it out and then maybe it will be more clear. How are we doing? Please do elaborate about the way in which a wounded personality can develop on the spiritual path without doing spiritual bypass. What does that mean? Does it mean being in therapy until such time that one is healed and that one is then deeply in the spiritual practice? Well, therapy, of course, for some people can be helpful. I'm not saying that some people who have a lot of very deep psychological problems, there are times when actually meditation might be too difficult for them to handle. Because especially people who have been through a lot of trauma, unless they are in a very supportive environment, if memories come up, they might be overwhelmed, they might not be able to deal with it. Also, people who tend to be schizophrenic, it's probably better they don't meditate. And therefore, in that case, maybe therapy, sometimes psychiatric medicines might be helpful to get people balanced enough that they can then start using meditation as a healing tool. It really is something which is such a vast subject that one cannot deal with it just like that. Different people are different. But I would not say that meditation is a panacea for everything. Sometimes people are very deeply wounded, and it might be better if they found alternative ways of beginning to heal first before they started exploring into their mind, because they wouldn't be able to deal with it. I mean, I know people who do retreats, and they really have a very difficult time dealing with the stuff that comes up, especially if people have suffered very abusive childhoods and so forth. Maybe they need some help, other help too. Eventually, of course, as the mind becomes more balanced, we are able to accept what is happening to us, then we can use also meditation, which will heal at a much deeper level. But psychiatry basically is intended to give us a nice, healthy, balanced ego. And then meditation is there for dissolving the ego. So they don't have to be opponents. They can actually work hand in hand. And sometimes when I'm like giving talks in America or in Australia or somewhere, and I say, well, who in the audience is involved in psychiatry or therapy, and etc., probably 2/3 of the audience raise their hands. So, you know, psychiatrists and therapists are very interested in Buddhism nowadays. And Buddhists are becoming increasingly interested in psychiatry, so it's a kind of courtship. I wouldn't say it's a marriage at this point. But they're kind of smiling at each other and inviting each other out for dinner and seeing about getting together more closely. And I think that this is one of the contributions which the West will make to everywhere that Buddhism goes. It absorbs the culture of that country that it goes to. You know, so you get Japanese Buddhism, you get Tibetan Buddhism, Sri Lankan Buddhism, Thai Buddhism, Japanese, Chinese Buddhism, etc. And each one, it takes from its own culture. Like in China, it had a very strong Confucian side to it and a Taoist side to it. And in Tibet, of course, it took on the shamanistic Bon ideas. And in Burma, it took on a lot of the Burmese animistic ideas. So Buddhism is very adaptable, actually. It changes its color depending which vessel it's poured into, it changes its shape. But the basic essence stays the same. The doctrine stays the same underneath it, all the different outer manifestations. So when it comes to the West, we also have to ask, what is the West contributing? Of course, these are early years. But one of the things is this bringing together of the science of the mind from a psychiatric point of view and the science of the mind from a Buddhist meditation point of view, and seeing how they can help each other in certain areas when one is maybe not as strong as the other one. So that many psychiatrists now teach meditation. Many meditation teachers are psychiatrists. And so there is this interesting contribution from both sides, which I think is very interesting, and the way, at least in the West, the Buddha Dharma is going to be going more an understanding from the psychiatric point of view as well as from the meditation point of view, what is the mind and how it can heal and then go beyond the just merely having a happy, balanced ego. This is also what psychiatry is interested in, is that it's always been dealing with a damaged ego, how to make it healthy. And of course, Buddhism is dealing with a healthy ego, how to become transcend the ego. So I think that sometimes, especially if one has a very damaged sense of self, along with doing practices like loving kindness and compassion and basic simple shamatha, if it's really something which is very difficult to handle, then a skilled therapist could also help, especially one who has spiritual orientation and understands the path of meditation. Then you can work hand in hand with that. Yes. Huh? Oh, okay. Okay. So I'm sorry for all of those whose answers I didn't give. This means you can ask Boaz, because Boaz is extremely knowledgeable and experienced, and he absolutely can help you with all your difficulties. Before we hand out the books, I would genuinely like to give a big hand to Boaz, because without him, nothing. Little really, this country is very privileged to have this bodhisattva with you. And I'm so glad. I do hope that you all appreciate. He's very modest. He's very unassuming. And he is really exemplar of the Dharma life well lived. So well done, Boaz. Thank you. I would just like to say that really thank you all very much for being an exemplary audience. Whenever I give talks, I never really quite know what I'm going to say. And it depends so much on the response one is getting from those that one is speaking with, and also the kind of questions that people put forward. So I really do appreciate this very much. Your warmth, your interest, you didn't fall asleep, nobody snored too loudly. I appreciate that. And so thank you very, very much, really. And also all of those, as Boaz has said, all those behind the scenes who have been working so selflessly to bring this event into being. I know that so many of them have been working so hard, and as Boaz said, you know, the day and night for so many weeks, it takes a lot just to put up this event. You know, I come here, I sit here, everybody, you know, it thinks it all depends on me. I'm a minor role in this whole enterprise. Yes, really. You know, I just come at the end and take all the glory. But, you know, without all these wonderful, wonderful people working so hard and as I say, really very selflessly to bring this event about, it would never have happened. So from my heart, I am very grateful for Boaz and for his wonderful, wonderful team of volunteers and helpers who themselves really do exemplify how to be a harmonious community. Because it's so important. The Buddha praised again and again the importance of good friends, of a spiritual community to support us. And so for all of you, I hope that you really do create this. If you haven't already, then please come together with Dharma groups and really enjoy the sustenance of being with people who share like values. It's not a matter, as I said before, of being Buddhist, not Buddhist. That's not so important. To my mind, what is important is having the same genuine values of what matters in this life, of spreading kindness, of spreading harmony, of not harming others, of being there to bring happiness to whoever we meet. This transcends all religious dogma. It's to do with opening up our heart. And so this has been shown very much this weekend for me in the way it has been brought about so beautifully and apparently so effortlessly as a result of so much effort. And so thank you all very, very much from my heart, and thank you, Boaz. So please go ahead do the
Okay. I'll just do a
very
very short Hebrew version I'm using. Okay. Let's take a minute just to appreciate what we shared here in the last 2 days. To really appreciate our good karma that brought us here. Be happy that we wanted to be here and we took the effort to be here and we had a chance to be here. And then maybe make a inner promise that we won't keep what we got here just to ourselves. So when we come out from here, we share it, not necessarily in Dharma talks, but in how we behave. We share it with the world. לו התודעה הערה, הבודיצ'יטה, שטרם נולדה, תיוולד ותצמח. וזו שכבר נולדה לא תדעך, רק תמשיך ותפרח. תודה רבה. Thank you.